Can I get a show of hands of people who hate show of hands at conferences? This talk is dedicated to you. All questions will be rhetorical. You may have heard of technical debt. I'm here to talk to you about technical intimidation. Do you know Rails? Do you know all of Rails? Do you know why we like the word active so much, but not so much that we couldn't call it active mailer? Can you program concurrently? Can you asynchronously stream hypermedia? I don't really know what that is, but Google Image gave me this, and Klabnik's up there, so legit. Can you inject SQL into a cannoli? Do you know how to get closure with your monads? Again, Google Image, I don't know, but I guess it has something to do with futility. Does anyone understand what this is in JavaScript? Do you know they're actually putting JavaScript on servers these days? Which reminds me, I have a Kickstarter for hosting Oracle in my browser, so if you've got any loose change. Does anybody know what Adam Keyes is talking about here? Do you know if you take out all the buzzwords from this post, all you're left with is ASCII art of a troll face? All these were taken from recent Ruby and JavaScript weekly news editions. Does anyone here know all of this? If you said yes, you're lying, because I made that one up. But seriously, recently a prominent member of our industry posted this on his blog, and he said, I was reluctant to ask a question. I wanted to be seen as savvy and on the ball. And if you can relate to that, I can relate to that. So can Kent Beck. But sometimes it's not just that. Sometimes it's me and just technology, and we're staring at each other, and I just know it's just going to be this big pain in the neck, and it's just going to leave me with this feeling of shame. Now, there are two traits common to people. One is adaptability, and the other is shame. And when you combine these, you get hoarders. Now, if you're laughing, while there is a bit of the ridiculous in that picture, it illustrates how powerful shame can be in our lives. And while it may not play out so noticeably for most of us, shame can shape our thoughts and feelings in similar ways, with these sorts of messages just kind of running around through our mind all day. Jerry Weinberg was once asked, what do you consider the most important thing for a programmer to do when beginning a new project? I think each should be sure they are in good physical condition without nagging psychological problems. Now, these shame messages are nagging psychological problems, and since shame does have a way of robbing our perspective and convincing us we're stuck, let's put what we do back into perspective. Software is hard. Steve McConnell, paraphrasing Dijkstra, says, computing is the only profession in which a single mind is obliged to span the intellectual distance of 9 orders of magnitude. Eric Sink in his blog once detailed 46 levels of abstraction his .NET application has to deal with. Raymond Chen, a well-known blogger from inside Microsoft, once went through a detailed post about why it's a bad idea to delete a critical section while you're in that critical section, but after all of these reasons why not to do it, concludes with, but maybe there's a flaw in my logic. Jan Mickoski talks about good design being a fractally hard problem. The more closely you focus on any given feature, the more rough edges you find to polish. And the only sane approach is to iterate in an area until you've got it to a place you care about and then move on. Recently, NPR had an article about how hard it is for professionals to spot problems they're trained to find. So, if 83% of radiologists cannot see the gorilla in this image, if Gary Kasparov can blunder away his queen in a game where he can see the entire board, but I can only see 0.002% of my code base on the screen at one time, cut me some slack. But what about all the things? Look, you're not going to be able to learn all of the things, and it doesn't matter, at least not to people like Martin Fowler. Given someone with good broad design skills and someone who only knows your platform really well, which one would you prefer? Martin will take the one with broad design skills. But what about everyone else who does know everything or seems like he knows everything? Well, the trick is don't be intimidated by these people. Learn from them. Pat Metheny gave his advice for young musicians is always be the worst guy in every band you're in. If you're the best player there, you need to be in a different band. And finally, a quote from Dijkstra, we shall do a much better programming job provided we approach the task with a full appreciation of its tremendous difficulty, that we stick to modest and elegant programming languages, and that we respect the intrinsic limitations of the human mind and approach the task as very humble programmers. So one last thing, Brené Brown has some wonderful TED Talks on the topic of shame. Go Google TED Shame and you'll find them. Ash Dryden had a great talk at Ruby Midwest earlier this year touching on this subject as well. This is me on the web. Peace out and flying chunky bacon.